Good afternoon. Welcome to Grade 12 English First Additional Language. Today we continue with the series of lessons on Macbeth. We are going to start with Act 4 and specifically a very important scene is Act 4, Scene 1. Please have your Macbeth book and notes with you that you can follow and add notes as I'm explaining. So it's a beautiful day to learn something new. Here we go. The summary of Act 4, Scene 1. The witches conjure up 3 apparitions in answer to Macbeth's request. A decapitated head with a war helmet on, it tells him to be wary of Macduff. A blood-covered baby that tells him that nobody born of a woman can harm him. And a child wearing a crown and holding a branch in his hand. It tells him that he cannot be defeated until Birnam Wood marches against him at Dunsinane. To him, these predictions suggest that he will neither be killed nor defeated, but will die naturally. They each, however, have a hidden meaning. The witches conjure up another spectacle. 8 kings ushered in by the ghost of Banquo, showing that Banquo's descendants will one day be rulers of Scotland. Macbeth is told that Macduff has fled and has gone to England to beg the help of King Edward on behalf of Malcolm and to join forces with them. He is furious and calls for the senseless attack on Macduff's castle. He orders the killing of his wife, children, and everybody related to him. So in this scene, it shows how Macbeth's character has deteriorated. He has wholly given himself over to evil and he becomes more desperate by the minute. He now seeks out the evil witches intentionally. The previous time he saw them, they were waiting for him. Even more terrible is the difference between the Macbeth described by his wife as too kind and caring to murder Duncan when she said, "You are too full of the milk of human kindness." And the Macbeth who cold-bloodedly orders the massacre of Macduff's wife and children. The malicious cruelty of this crime, by which Macbeth has nothing to gain, marks the lowest point of his fall. Now remember, Macbeth killed Duncan to become king. He killed the guards to ensure his alibi. He killed Banquo because Banquo suspected foul play and Banquo was aware of the prophecies. He killed Fleance because of the witches' prophecies to Banquo. But he had nothing to gain by killing Macduff's family. So he ruthlessly kills innocent people now without reason. And the killing of Duncan and Banquo was done secretly, while now he openly orders the killing of Macduff's family. So Macbeth has totally given himself over to evil. Very important to remember in this scene. So the setting is a dark cave with a boiling cauldron standing in the middle. Thunder. Enter the 3 witches. The witches are preparing to meet Macbeth. They enter the cave amid thunderclaps and gather around a large pot, the cauldron, in which they put a variety of poisoned ingredients they need for their magic spells. So an evil atmosphere is created by the mere appearance of the witches and by the sound effects. There was thunder, music and song. And the witches in this scene chant a charm as they throw horribly repulsive ingredients into the cauldron, which is the large pot boiling on the fire, into which the witches put all the ingredients used for brewing up magic spells. Right, on this slide we see that the witches start up with the spell and she starts with the word thrice. Now the witches favor odd numbers like 3 because even numbers represent balance and harmony. She says it is time, so it's time to begin working the spell. So round about the cauldron go. So they're dancing around the pot. And the first thing they threw in was a poisonous toad. So toads were believed to be very poisonous, and this specific one sweated poison for 31 days, a full month, while sleeping under a cold stone. So it was growing more poisonous all the time. And then at the bottom of your screen, the famous chant of the witches, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. So the witches are now dancing around the boiling pot, throwing into it a list of loathsome ingredients and chanting this evil incantation in unison. So it means let there be twice as much hardship, double, double, toil and trouble. So let there be twice as much hardship and trouble in the world as there already is. Now they're listing all the ingredients that they are throwing into this cauldron. So they start with fillet of a fenny snake. So it's a slice of meat from a poisonous snake that lives in a swamp, one of the most unpleasant, filthy places to live in. In the cauldron boil and bake eye of newt and toe of frog. And newt is a small water lizard believed to be poisonous. Wool of bat, the soft hair of a bat, and tongue of dog. Adder's fork and blind worm sting. Now, adder is a snake, again poisonous. Blind worm sting, a slow worm, once thought to be poisonous. Lizard's leg and howlet's wing, a baby owl's wing, for a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth boil and bubble. A hell broth is a thick, powerful soup for the devil, so it's to be used for evil charms. And then again, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. So this evil refrain is repeated before the third witch adds her gruesome collection to the pot. So many of the ingredients you will see they put into their pot are horrible, unnatural, and it emphasizes poison. Apart from providing a sense of horror, they suggest destructions, since pieces of various animals and people have to be broken off to be put in the cauldron. And this reminds us of the destruction, disorder, and evil Macbeth's uncontrolled ambition has brought to Scotland. And then they continue with the ingredients: scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy, moor and gulf. Now, witch mummy is a witch's dried corpse. Now, the powder was used for medicine and was believed to have strong magical properties. Moor and gulf is the stomach and the throat, both associated with the greedy appetite, and this indicate Macbeth's insatiable ambition. And then he goes on with the salt sea shark. The stomach was filled with devoured prey. Root of hemlock digged in the dark. The roots of this poisonous plant were dug up at night because it was supposed to be more poisonous then. Liver of a blaspheming Jew. Now, Jews rejected Christ, therefore they were thought to provide suitable ingredients for evil spells. Gall of goat and slips of ewe slivered in the moon's eclipse. Gall, the liver, was supposed to be the seat of passion, and gall is a bitter liquid from the liver associated with spite and nastiness and bitterness. And the yew was a yew tree, which was also poisonous, that grew in churchyards. And it was extra poisonous if it was broken off during an eclipse. An eclipse was a much dreaded omen, always regarded as a foreshadowing of evil to come. And then they go on, nose of Turk and Tartar's lips. The Turks, the Tartans, and the Jews are believed to be Antichrist and would increase both the effectiveness and harmfulness of this witch's evil brew. Finger of a birth strangled babe, ditch delivered by a drab. So it's a baby that was strangled at birth, what was delivered in a ditch to a prostitute mother, and it was his little finger, and that little baby was not baptized, so it was non-Christian. Make the gruel thick and slab, make it slimy, and there to tigers' children, stomach and intestines, for the ingredients of our cauldron. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Now that was the third repetition of the evil refrain. Again, the number 3, it emphasized the evil disorder that witches encourage, and it creates tension and heightens the evil mood. Right, and then they say, cool it with a baboon's blood, then the charm is firm and good. Baboon's blood is associated with lust, reminding us of Macbeth's lust for power. Now we see lots of the ingredients relating to venom and venomous creatures such as the fenny snake, the adder's fork, and the zwelter's venom. Now venom works by slowly breaking down the body's nervous system. Much in the same way, the witches seem to be trying to bring about Macbeth's downfall in a slow, painful, and deliberate way. You could also argue that the use of different body parts like eye, toe, tongue, entrails, all put together help to create a sort of a monstrous creature, which could reflect the idea that Macbeth himself has become less of a man, more of a foul monster through the deeds he has committed. And then Hecate enters on the scene where she says, oh, well done, I commend your pains. So she thanks and praises them for the trouble they have taken. She promises them that each of them will share in the eventual success. And then if we look at the bottom, she tells them that they should dance and sing around the cauldron in order to strengthen the magic spell of everything they have put into the pot. Notice the ironic contrast when she says, like elves and fairies in a ring. So she's comparing the evil witches to elves and fairies. Right, the second witch says something very important. By the prickling of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. So an itching or a tingling thumb was believed to be an omen of approaching evil. And Macbeth enters 2 lines later, and she says, open locks whoever knocks. So she tells the door to unlock to anyone who wishes to enter. So she welcomes Macbeth into their magic circle, and at that moment Macbeth enters, so he has become an instrument of evil, and even the witches describe him as being evil. And then immediately he says, how now, you secret black and midnight hags, what is it you do? So Macbeth's greeting of the witches shows that he is well aware of the fact that they are evil. He calls them mysterious, ugly old women who practice black magic under cover of darkness. And then the witches answers him, a deed without a name, a deed that is so dreadful that it cannot be named. They cannot tell Macbeth that they are actually planning his downfall. So we see here Macbeth arrives at the witches' lair with extraordinary boldness and arrogance. And then he goes on and he says, I conjure you by that which you profess. So to conjure means command, but he uses a word associated with witchcraft. And the entire speech is characteristic of the desperate recklessness of Macbeth. He is determined to have an answer from the witches, no matter what destruction of life and property will result from it. And then he ends where he says, which you profess. Profess means claim to possess or claim to know. Answer me by that power which you say that you have. Right, and then he goes on. Even if the winds have to be unleashed to threaten and destroy churches. Now the winds were believed to be tied up in a bag. They could only blow when the bag was untied. And he says, and let them fight against the churches. So the churches are associated with God, order, and forces of good. So the winds can be unleashed to fight against the churches. And he says, even though the foamy waves have to destroy every ship that sails on the sea, and though bladed corn be lodged, so unripe corn and trees are flattened or uprooted, so it cannot develop or ripen. So this speech is an invocation of chaos. He identifies himself with both outer disorder and inner turmoil. Macbeth is willing to sacrifice the future of the entire universe to gain his own personal and temporary satisfaction. He puts his own self-interest before order and harmony of the universe. So he visualizes universal chaos in which winds and waters become wild and destructive. Right, and he goes on here. He says, even though the precious seeds from which all life in the universe spring be destroyed, he imagines a world in complete chaos, even to the point where destruction itself becomes sick of destruction. Destruction itself is disgusted by its own violent acts of disorder. So in our modern terms, you might think of Germans as the molecules or atoms God used to create the universe. This idea suggests destruction in its total form. It is as if Macbeth would destroy the future to get what he wants in the present. So he's determined to hear what lies in store for him, be it bad or good, even if it means destroying the universe. He feels nothing is as important as his own selfish and frantic desire for confidence to face the future. He even seems to welcome anarchy, that means chaos and disorder. He's willing to sacrifice the future of the universe for his own personal and temporary satisfaction. So when Macbeth in this speech conjures the witches to answer him, his language is uncompromising. He matches their power with a powerful curse of his own, demanding to have an answer, even if it requires the unleashing of all the elements of air, water, and earth, and even if all the universe, natural or man-made, tumble into ruins. Right, so the witches now agree to answer. But then they ask Macbeth if he wants to hear the answer from them or from the evil spirits that they serve. And Macbeth asks for the evil spirits to be called on, where they say if thou rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters. And again, very arrogantly, he says, call them, let me see them. So remember, what he's going to see now are apparitions. So an apparition is a spirit which is visible, but which is intangible. In other words, we cannot touch it. It appears to exist, but it has no substance. They are, however, real and not merely figments of Macbeth's imagination, like the floating dagger and Banquo's ghost. But Macbeth's most defiant act by far is to desire to hear the prophecy of his future, not from the witches, who are themselves only mediums of the supernatural, but from their masters that are controlling fate. Now the first witch just said, pour in Saul's blood that had eaten her 9 pharaoh. In order to call up their masters, they need an even more potent magic brew, and the ingredients therefore become more unnatural and disgusting. So she says, pour in the blood of a pig that has eaten her 9 piglets. Again, 3 times 3 is 9. A pig that ate its young was thought to be unholy. And then more ingredients was the sweat of a murderer that dropped on the gallows as he was being hanged. And the witches said together, come high or low, thyself and office deftly show. So the apparitions of high and low rank are summoned to appear, reveal yourself and show what you can do. So the witches here instruct the apparitions to become visible and to perform their tasks skillfully. Right, and then it's thunder, and the first apparition appeared, and it was an armed head. So it's a bodiless head. The head has been cut off. It wears the helmet from a suit of armor, suggestion of battle. Now, very important, it is symbolic of Macbeth's fate at the end of the play. His head is cut off by Macduff, but he believes he sees Macduff's head as he planned to have him killed. And then Macbeth says, "Tell me, thou unknown power." But the witches immediately stopped him. "You must say nothing. Do not question him. Just listen. It can read your thoughts." And then the first apparition said, "Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth, beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Five. Dismiss me enough. Be careful of Macduff. He is a threat." And then Macbeth just answered, "Whatever thou art, for thy good caution, thanks. Thank you for the warning. Thou hast harped my fear all right. You have confirmed my suspicion and thus strengthened his belief in them." So he already mistrusted Macduff as he did not attend the coronation. Macduff questioned him after the murder of the two guards and he refused to attend the state banquet. And then the first witch just said the more powerful apparition is going to appear. The second apparition is that of a bloody child. Now this is symbolic of Macduff at birth. His mother could not give birth normally and he was cut from her womb. Therefore, a blood-covered and not born the natural or the normal way. So we see here, remember, throughout this scene, the theme of equivocation. So one of the forms evil takes, a truth is told, but unknown to the listener. It's a partial truth and has another meaning known only to the speaker. So Macbeth seems to be super confident in his replies here to the apparitions. There is little fear or respect with this punning reply when the second apparition says, "Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth," and he replies, "Had I 3 ears, I'd hear thee." So to his name being called 3 times, he displays a comic arrogance. And then the second apparition says, "Be bloody bold and resolute." So it encourages Macbeth to be violent, murderous, courageous, and determined. And he says, "Laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth." So he can laugh scornfully at the power of the mightiest man, for nobody born of a woman can harm him. And then that apparition disappears. And then Macbeth says, "Then live, Macduff, what need I fear of these?" So Macbeth is successfully misled and believes himself to be invincible. First, he decides to let Macduff live. "Live, Macduff, what need I fear of thee?" And then he says, "But yet I'll make assurance double sure." He then decides to ensure that fate keeps his side of the contract by murdering Macduff. Macduff must be killed so that Macbeth can feel safe and live entirely without fear. The third apparition appeared. It's a child crowned with a tree in his hand. So the third apparition is a child wearing a crown and holding a branch in his hands. And this apparition represents the legitimate young King Malcolm, who will take the crown from Macbeth. He orders his soldiers to cut off branches and carry them in front of them in their approach to Dunsinane in order to conceal their numbers. And then he says, "What is this that rises like the issue of a king, the child or offspring of a king, and wears upon his baby brow the round and top of sovereignty?" Macbeth wonders who this royal-looking child is that wears a crown to emphasize his ultimate power. And then the apparition answers, "Be lion-mettled, proud, and take no care." So be as brave and confident as a lion. "Who chafes, who frets, or where conspirers are, Macbeth shall never be vanquished until great Birnam wood to high Dunsinane hill shall come against him. So he does not have to fear or take notice of dissatisfied and rebellious subjects or those that plot against him. And he further promised Macbeth that he will not be defeated until great Birnam wood marches against him at Dunsinane. Now, Birnam wood and Dunsinane were 20 kilometers apart. And from Dunsinane walls, this army marching across the countryside behind its screen of branches will make it look as if Birnam wood were approaching the castle. Again, very important, the theme of equivocation. Then Macbeth says, that will never be. Who can impress the forest, bid the tree unfix his earth-bound root? So Macbeth is delighted as he believes it to be impossible to force a forest into military service. He cannot see how a forest can be commanded to uproot itself. To him, this implies that he will never be conquered or defeated. So he says the predictions are extremely favorable. And then he goes on, he says, good rebellions dead, arise never. So it's a reference to the ghost of murdered Banquo that appeared to him at the banquet. Till the wood of Birnam rise, and our high-placed Macbeth, position as king, shall live lease of nature, pay his breath to time and mortal custom. So Macbeth believes no rebels will ever successfully rise against him, not until Birnam wood rises up and moves towards his castle, and he sees that as impossible. So he is convinced he will live out his allotted lifespan and die naturally. And then he asks a question. He says, yet my heart throbs to know one thing. Tell me if you can tell so much. Shall Banquo's issue ever reign in this kingdom? So Macbeth is still obsessed about the prediction regarding Banquo's children, and he wants to know if the prediction that Banquo's descendants will rule Scotland one day will really come true. And the Witcher says they urge Macbeth to be satisfied with what he already knows and to ask no more. And he, however, demands an answer and threatens to curse the witches eternally if they do not answer him, and an eternal curse fall on you. All right, and then he says, let me know, I want to know, why sinks the cauldron and what noise is this? So the cauldron starts to sink into the earth and eerie ubu music is being played. And then the Witcher says, show, show, show. And the witch says, well, the future will be revealed and this sight will cause him sorrow. Come like shadows, so depart. So the show of 8 kings soon to follow are spirits, visible but not tangible, therefore shadows. And then a show of 8 kings, the last with a mirror in his hand and Banquo's ghost following. So as I said, the last one was carrying a mirror that reflects the future, and they are followed by Banquo's ghost. And the first king looks like Banquo, and Macbeth fearfully orders it to go away. Thou art too like the spirit of Banquo, down, go away. And then he goes on, thy crown does sear mine eyeballs. The crown is so bright it burns his eyes. And one after the other, the rest of the 8 kings appear, and they all resemble Banquo. And the last one carries a magic mirror which reflects an even longer line of similar kings still to come, stretching into infinity. He says here, and yet the 8th appears who bears a glass, so it carries a mirror in which the future is reflected. And then he goes on, which shows me many more, and some I see, so some of them are carrying the twofold balls. Now when a king is crowned, he holds a golden orb in his hand to show his earthly power. And twofold means 2 kingdoms, Scotland and England. And treble scepters carry, and some of them has treble scepters. So scepter also stands for kingly power. Treble is 3, is king of England, Scotland and Ireland. horrible sight, now I see it is true. For the blood-boltered Banquo smiles upon me and points at them for this. Now he says, Banquo, with his hair clotted with blood, smiles at Macbeth and proudly points at them, claiming they are his descendants. And then he asks, what is this so? Is this really the truth? And then the witches answer him, this is exactly what will happen. And she wants to know why he is so surprised, because these predictions were made some time ago already. And then the first witch urges her sister to help her cheer up Macbeth by showing him the best of their entertainment, music and dance. And then the witches vanish, and Macbeth is very angry. Where are they? Gone! And then he damns this destructive and evil day. But he was the one who deliberately sought out the witches or evil and instructed them to answer his questions. And then he commands the person outside to enter. Lennox enter and he asks, what is your grace's will? And he says, saw you the weird sisters. Now Lennox seems to have accompanied Macbeth, but has been left outside. Macbeth seemingly trusted him. Ironically, he was the one that earlier called Macbeth a tyrant. So here Macbeth asked Lennox if he saw the witches leave. And he says, no, indeed, my lord, he didn't see them. And then Macbeth says, infected be the air whereon they ride, and damned all those that trust them. So he wishes the air on which they ride to be infected with the plague. And then he placed a curse on everyone that trusts their prophecies. And that is irony, because he damns himself as he trusted them and will continue to trust them right to the end. And then he says, I did hear the galloping of horse. Who was it that came by? Macbeth wanted to know who the people on horseback were that he had heard. And Lennox replied that some men came by to report that Macduff has fled to England. Right, again now Macbeth aside where only he can hear it, and he says, time thou anticipate my dread exploit. It was as if time anticipated what Macbeth wanted to do. He wanted to kill Macduff, and time prevented him from doing so. And then he says, I should have acted immediately. Now he lost the opportunity to kill Macduff, and Macbeth decides that in future he will act impulsively without stopping to consider his actions. And immediately to demonstrate his decision, he decides to launch a surprise attack on Macduff's castle, where he says, the castle of Macduff I will surprise. And now we see, he says here, seize upon 5, give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. So everyone that is related to him. So the massacre of Macduff's family illustrates how evil and cruel Macbeth has become. It is merely an act of revenge against Macduff. He ruthlessly kills innocent people without reason. Right, and then he says, no boasting like a fool, this deed I'll do before this purpose school. It's not a mere threat, it must be done before he rethinks his plan. And he says, but no more sights. He decides to have no further dealings with the witches. He does not want to see any more apparitions. And then he says, where are these gentlemen? Come, bring me where they are. So Macbeth commands Lennox to take him to the people who brought the news of Macduff's flight. They are obviously some of the spies he keeps and will most probably carry out the attack. Now notice the link between Banquo and Macduff. Banquo is murdered, but Fleance escapes, and his descendants inherit the throne. Macduff's family is destroyed, but Macduff lives to kill Macbeth. Now this is very important. This is a short summary of the apparitions, the 4 apparitions. All right, so you have the first column, what Macbeth sees, what the apparition says, what Macbeth hears or understands, and what the apparition actually means. And in the third column, with what Macbeth hears or understands, it reminds us of in Act 3, Scene 5, when Hecate says that Macbeth will cause his own destruction by being overconfident. He will place more trust in his hope than his reason or common sense. So he hears what he wants to hear. So the first apparition, as we saw, is a head with armor on. It's symbolic of Macbeth's fate at the end of the play. What did the apparition say? Beware of Macduff. What did Macbeth hear? Be careful of Macduff, he's dangerous. What did the apparition actually mean? Macduff will kill you. The second apparition, a young child covered in blood. What it says, be bloody, bold and resolute, laugh to scorn, etc. What Macbeth heard. All men are born from a woman, so Macbeth believes he does not need to be afraid of any man, so no man can harm him. What the apparition actually means was that Macduff was not born in the normal way. Because he was born by caesarean section, he will be able to kill Macbeth. The third one was a child with a crown on his head holding a branch in his hand. What the apparition say? Macbeth shall never be vanquished until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hills shall come against him. What Macbeth hear? Macbeth will never be defeated until Birnam Wood uproots itself and marches the hill at Dunsinane Castle. What it actually meant was Malcolm and his army will cut down branches, carry them above their heads, and when they march to Dunsinane to attack Macbeth. And then the last one was the 8 kings, the last one with the mirror in his hand, followed by the ghost of Banquo. So the apparition does not speak to Macbeth. The ghost of Banquo smiles and points to all his descendants. And then Macbeth is bewildered and shocked. It is clear to him that Banquo's sons will be the future kings of Scotland. And then Banquo's sons will be the future kings of Scotland. Right, that concludes a longer lesson today on Act 4. Scene 1. Please remember this is an extremely important scene. You must familiarize yourself fully with it. So I hope that you had so much fun as I did. I will see you all tomorrow when we continue with Act 4. Have a wonderful afternoon. Stay safe. Make wise choices. Goodbye.